Hi, everybody. First of all, you may notice it's a little louder than it normally is, this microphone. I have boosted the audio because after some people complained that the audio was no good and it was garbled and turn it down, other people complained that it was not loud enough. So I've boosted it and we'll see if this works any better. I have no idea, but we'll see. I'm still playing through Assassin's Creed, but this story happened over the weekend and people felt very passionately about it on Twitter. So I wanted to talk about it. The other stuff that's going on with me right now is still going on. The patrons are going to get a story and a half this Thursday once the dust settles, hopefully positively. If you want to hear that cool story, help support this channel, become a monthly patron, patreon.com/Leanna K. New patrons would be awesome right now because this is going to be a very expensive period of months. But more on that later. That's not what I'm talking about today. What I am talking about today is this ongoing controversy, rolling controversy surrounding The Simpsons. And the fact that The Simpsons might be removing the character Apu from the show. And for people who are just catching up, I don't think there are very many people who aren't aware of this controversy, but there was a documentary a while back called The Problem with Apu, and they went through not the elevator pitch is that it's about how Apu is essentially brownface. It's a bunch of Harvard-educated white guys using a racial caricature to poke fun at brown people. That is not my read on the documentary. I also thought the documentary dealt with the overall lack of representation of brown people in the media overall. And I feel like that's part of the documentary that has really gotten lost in the discussion. And that's extremely important. And so I feel like the debate surrounding the documentary has not done either side of the issue justice. And then The Simpsons tried unsuccessfully to combat the thing, basically saying people shouldn't be so easily offended. I think they really picked the wrong character using Lisa Simpson to deliver that message. Don't break character voice if you're going to make a statement. That's dumb. There were plenty of other characters who could have delivered that line, but you got Lisa to do it. But different people have different issues surrounding this character, and that's the challenge here. Some people rightly say that The Simpsons is a show full of stereotypes. Groundskeeper Willie, Cletus, the comic book guy, Chief Wiggum. The Simpsons is really chock-a-block stereotypes. Whereas other people are like, it's one thing to make fun of white people when you're white. It's very different to make fun of brown people when you're white, when you're not even hiring a brown person to do the voice. And I think there's an element of truth to that. I think, Hank Azaria would not lose his job just by not doing the voice of Apu anymore, because he does like 6 to 9 different characters. The Simpsons have lost voice actors, and Phil Hartman died by suicide, and other voice actors and actresses passed away. They did various things with the various characters. And so, my preferred solution would be to recast the voice actor so someone brown is actually getting a job out of the whole thing. But also, as a producer, Adi Shankar was trying to do, he was doing a script contest, as you see here, to try to salvage the character, to try to use Apu to bust stereotypes and create more positive depictions of characters. And he was the one, by the way, that made the conversation, that made the comment about Apu being the byproduct of a predominantly Harvard-educated white male writer's room. And that was him, not me. Just, if you're going to yell at somebody, know who actually said that. That was a quote. And, that brings into question the whole thing of, it's been years of Harvard-educated writers writing blue-collar farce on The Simpsons. And that in itself brings up a whole issue of, is class a greater deficit? Is class a greater divider than race? I'm not going to get into that today. But what I do want to say is I think that once again, the Simpsons Harvard-educated white writers room has done the worst thing they could possibly do, because they're taking something that's been accused of stereotype, and you'll notice I am not stating my opinion yet. I'll get to that in a bit, but it's a character that's been accused of stereotype and just getting rid of the character, which for all their Harvard education shows they don't understand that stereotype is still better than erasure, right? Like that was the whole thing about the documentary that I felt was missed, that the greater problem surrounding Apu was the fact that there were no other characters out there. Apu was all they had, right? I believe the whole thing started off with an essay, but they decided they just don't want the problem. All these rich white dudes just don't want the mess. Somebody's Steam name is, I'll switch away. But somebody just, they don't want the mess, and they're just out with ya. They really don't get it. Now, here's what I think happened with The Simpsons. This is just my opinion, observation more than opinion. The Simpsons came on the air in 1989. It was very different. It was very rudimentary when it first premiered. You look at the first few seasons of that show, especially the first season, like, wow, how did this ever survive? But it was very much a product of the early 1990s. And in the early 1990s, the Indian American experience was very much Apu. That really reflected. But in the, oh God, how many years, fast forward from 1989 to like 2016, I think it was 2016 when this whole thing, ish went, the reality for Indian Americans has changed, and The Simpsons is a show trapped in amber. I mean, Maggie has never aged. Bart is still in the 4th grade. And the show is starting to show its age in this snapshot of America. At this point, The Simpsons has about as much to do with the American experience as watching an episode of Leave It to Beaver has of the American experience. It is just a snapshot of the time in which it sort of found its feet. And that's really the problem that The Simpsons overall as a program is experiencing right now, because it chose to not progress the characters, even though, some characters are written out and all that stuff, because Bart's never going to go to high school. Lisa's never going to go to college. Maggie's never going to get out of diapers. They have a real challenge evolving their world. And so if something's just a problem, a PR problem, their solution is, just get rid of it, instead of, doing a really funny episode where Apu actually turns out to be the owner of this whole like Quickie Mart. He has the entire like northeastern region Quickie Mart. He's the owner, and him and Mr. Burns get into a bidding war for a Tesla type company. Who knows, right? Like, you could do a really funny episode like that. Instead, they've decided to just keep this world fixed in place. And that's really difficult for the writers. Now, I admit that I haven't watched The Simpsons regularly in about 15 years. And the fact that I used to watch the show religiously, and the fact that I'll watch an episode here or there. And I mean, the thing about it is, you pick up an episode here or there, nothing has changed. And if you look at some of the other animated shows that have done really well, take South Park, for instance. It's been on the air quite a long time. South Park has evolved. Yes, they're still sort of in school. It's still a trapped in amber thing. But South Park has stayed fresh. South Park has continued to take on the news of the day, which The Simpsons used to do. I mean, when you think back in the day of like when they did the Homer meets a gay guy episode, those moments of relevance, they get like, celebrity cameos and everything like that. They're not taking celebrities from the 1990s. So their style guide has become too rigid in a way a show like South Park that is still trapped in amber animation hasn't. South Park has continued to evolve and add characters like, PC Principal and characters like Classy, characters like that keep the show relevant in a way that The Simpsons, it's almost like they don't want to do it because it's just too comfortable to keep things exactly as they are. And that's when you get into the question of comfortable for whom. I had some really interesting conversations on Twitter with people who are very bothered by Apu. Now, I said I'd declare my personal bias. I personally have more of an issue with Raj from The Big Bang Theory and the stereotypes of brown men there. And it's just because, first of all, I have friends who are really bothered by that particular stereotype, the sexually awkward, so uncomfortable on women you can't speak. Now, I had Indian Canadian people I know say, yeah, but some guys are like that who are Indian. And the truth is that there are guys of every race out there that don't know how to talk to girls. And the problem I have just personally with Raj on Big Bang is they took something that's sort of a universal truth, that there are black guys I know that completely clam up around women, and there are white guys I know that go completely silent around women, but they made it seem, and other people other brown people bought into this idea that this is something unique to Asian and South Asian men. And I have friends of mine who take this very personally because they have to encounter this stereotype of the sexless Asian man in real life, and it drives them crazy because the thing about stereotypes is when you step out of them, there's social punishments. You're not allowed to be an individual. People are very invested in the stereotypes that people have on you based on the way you look, and they get uncomfortable if you're not like that. I personally think that's part of the reason that guy from Aziz Ansari, is that his name? I personally think that's part of the reason that article, that Bad Date article, was so damaging to him, because he was always trying to kind of oppose stereotypes of doing this, very sexualized public persona, and he's this big expert on relationships and dating and all that stuff, and then it turned out he's actually kind of bad at it. It wasn't Hollywood's weird like this. You can survive a moral scandal as long as you don't violate your brand. And because he was working so hard to avoid that stereotype, when the stereotype caught up to him, it was very damaging for his career. That's how stereotypes work. Now, other people are bothered by Apu because, at least on Big Bang Theory, Raj is played by an actual brown man. He's actually making money off of it. Fair point. I I understand capitalism. I think that it actually is better if somebody's making money off the laughter. To me, that's the difference between laughing with and laughing at. Just me, as somebody with a comedy background who still writes funny ha-has. I think that makes, when someone's making money off of it, that means you're actually in on the joke. And at least there's one person there who can say, like, can we please take this in a different direction? I'd like this to grow a little bit. If nobody's there, Hank Azaria as the voice of Apu can't do that the same way. And in a climate where some actors are stepping away from roles because they don't fit the original race of the character, like in the Marvel franchises and stuff like that, that's a dicey place to be in. But I do think that some representation, at least with an actor with a say-so in the writing, a little bit of influence, I think that could really go a long way. They're not going to go that way. And I understand why people are upset when they're like, oh, the minute we were like, hey, modernize your tropes. And that's really what The Simpsons is. It's a collection of tropes. The minute they said that, the Simpsons solution was just get rid of the character completely. And the thing is, and this is what other people brought up, if you actually watch the Apu episodes, and they were some of my favorite ones, because they really dug deep into the preconceptions that people have about, people who are doing good, honest jobs like cab drivers and, guys behind the counter at gas stations and like the Quickie Mart employee and all that stuff. People have a tendency not to see these people. And so I always liked when they went back and went through Apu's backstory, even though it was still playing very much on cultural other. Again, Groundskeeper Willie kind of made me cringe after a while because that's all he was. He was an angry ginger, and that's a stereotype that I fight. Angry Scottish ginger, ho, 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 never heard that before. And the reality is that's funny until you're in a room and you're the only person that isn't allowed to get angry about anything because, then you're just dismissed as that fiery redhead. That makes me nuts. Your anger is somehow less legitimate because of that stereotype. Bugs the crap out of me, but there's nothing I can do about it. There's nothing I can do about it because that stereotype is so pervasive. So I totally understand why people have a problem with it. And the thing that's so disappointing is that the fix was so simple. All you have to do is pivot Apu to being a business owner instead of just an employee, to make him a small business owner and really play that up, and get a brown guy to voice him. And I was really surprised how many people had an issue with the idea of recasting, including my own husband. This really surprised me because parts get recast all the time, especially in voice work. Disney voices, the movies are so old, they have to recast the part. And I mean, was the Muppets just supposed to stop when Jim Henson died? No, they got somebody else to do the voice of Kermit the Frog. There was a bit of an adjustment period, and then people were like, all right, we understand this. We'd rather have some version of the character because we love the character than have the character completely go away. And I really think that getting rid of Apu is the worst decision they could have made. Keeping things as they were would actually have been better because then he's still there, right? Then he's still represented. Brown people are still represented on The Simpsons. Not that The Simpsons has a ton of racial diversity overall, but you know what I mean? I mean, even South Park added a black family. Like, what is so interesting is that this went under the radar for so long because we just sort of accepted The Simpsons as The Simpsons. And I think the only reason that this has clicked for me is because in gaming, we are all about innovation. A game franchise couldn't just keep giving us the same thing for, oh good Lord, almost 30 years. More than 30 years. Holy cannoli. No, 30 years. You couldn't do that in gaming. And this show has just coasted. And I think perhaps the reason that this wasn't noted sooner is because The Simpsons just sort of clicked along and had its audience and had dropped from sort of the zeitgeist that people really weren't paying attention anymore. People saw it no different as a rerun of The Flintstones, which was basically the honeymooners, in the Stone Age. And so people missed it. People became really complacent, and it wasn't to, it wasn't to the show's benefit that it was just continue to go along. I mean, the funny thing is that the show King of the Hill, I thought was much sharper satire of the U.S. Southwest. I know that The Simpsons is not the Southwest, but I actually thought King of the Hill of the animated sitcoms, I actually thought that was the best one in terms of writing. South Park does some absolutely hilarious stuff, but it's absolutely in your face. King of the Hill was so sharp and so shrewd. And even they had, the Indigenous American family. I'm sorry, I don't know what you guys call them down there anymore. Indian, like American Indian family. And the Laotian family next door, where everybody was like, are you Japanese or Chinese? And it was, I'm Laotian. Beat, beat, beat. Are you Japanese or Chinese? And there's an example of, it's a guy with broken English, and he's clearly a immigrant and things like that. But the joke was turned around on Dale, who was, the idiot. Dale's always the politically incorrect kind of boob that the butt of the joke was Dale, not Con. And of course, Connie, his daughter, becomes Bobby Hill's best friend. They did a better job with it on that show. It was overall a smarter show. And I mean, The Simpsons has a lot to be proud of. Any show that just goes on that long just says something. But its lack of innovation is really unacceptable. And I think this is just a symptom of that. It's real easy to poke at Harvard-educated writers putting words in blue-collar people's mouths. That personally irritates me because, again, they're mimicking a truth. They're not. It's not an insider's comedy. It's not people making fun of their own lot in life. It is certainly looking down on people from an ivory tower, but I would claim that every character on The Simpsons gets that because of the elitism in the writing room. That doesn't make it okay, and getting rid of Apu is not going to solve that larger problem that someone had the opportunity to point out just because they happen to have brown skin, and that's kind of a trendy topic right now. But that's my take on it. I am not at all saying it is bad to like Apu. I have laughed at Apu a lot. I think he's had some great lines. I do agree that over the years he's become a very well-developed character. That being said, I cannot ignore the people who are understandably just personally bothered by seeing that unevolved opinion presented on screen of where Indian Americans fit in the American landscape, in American culture. It has really evolved beyond that. The thing is, now we have characters like the character on the Resident. I believe he's Pakistani, not Indian, but we have him, and there's more Indian characters. They're just not as well known. And so we do sort of need to broaden that out. I mean, you think about the shows like, oh, Silicon Valley, great. The kid on Atypical is really quite funny. The guy on Chuck, I believe he might have been Persian. I'm not sure. But there are plenty of characters out there that are anti-stereotype. I mean, okay, the guy on The Resident is a doctor. That's the new stereotype. But he's still, you see him as a person. But those shows just don't have the cultural awareness of The Simpsons. And I think this is why, that's one reason this controversy continues not to go away. The other is just simply how poorly The Simpsons production has handled this whole issue. This could have been avoided. This could have been a much better result. But for whatever reason, they just decided to dig in and just, nope, we're just going to get rid of this. It's too much trouble. That's not cool. So, like Apu, don't like Apu. I think maybe the point of commonality we can all agree on is any representation is better than no representation at all. That being said, it's a good thing for people to be able to say, hey, here's a perspective you may have not considered. Can we maybe talk about this? Right? So that's where I'm at. Let me know what you think. Don't freak out. I have not said anybody's bad for liking the character. I've not said anybody's bad for disliking the character. I am cool with whatever you think about Apu. This is just my take on it. But I'm interested in what you have to say. So leave a comment and thanks for watching.